I'm Ashton Addison from the Crypto Coin Show, and today on Blockchain Interviews, we have Mark Rydon, co-founder at Aethir. Mark, welcome to the show, and thank you for taking the time.
Thanks for having me. Yeah, great to be here, Ashton.
Yeah, I know Aethir's been crazy busy with the launch of the platform and the token, and it's a pretty hot area. Decentralized cloud, graphic processing, AI, and gaming, which I'd love to dive into. I would love to start off our conversation, for those who aren't familiar, just a high level on what is everything that Aethir is working on, and then we can dive into all the latest details.
Yeah, for sure. We're an infrastructure project, so sometimes it's better for us to start with the problem we're solving, give people a bit of context, and then I can jump into explaining exactly what we do. So taking kind of a problem first approach, I think a lot of people in your audience have probably heard the phrase compute scarcity or GPU scarcity, right? People like Elon Musk have come out and said things like GPUs are harder to buy than drugs, right? You've got people like Mark Zuckerberg and Meta purchasing, just under $11 billion worth of NVIDIA's top GPU chip for their kind of Llama 3 AI ambitions, right? It's getting increasingly more difficult for startups and small to medium-sized enterprises to access this critical GPU resource, right? Critical for AI companies, critical for gaming companies. At Aethir, we kind of studied this problem quite deeply, right? And we've broken it down really into four distinct pieces. The first is obviously buy pressure, right? Buy pressure is driving scarcity in the market. The biggest tech companies in the world, OpenAI, Google, Microsoft, Amazon, Anthropic, they all essentially have an insatiable appetite for GPUs, right? They know that for them to win the AI race, they need to purchase more GPUs. Essentially, more GPUs means training AI quicker, and they can't train fast enough, right? So you have this sustained ongoing buy pressure that makes it really difficult to get access to these resources. Second, we have the inability of NVIDIA to produce chips fast enough for the market, right? They can only produce a certain number of chips per year. They're doing their best, and they are the biggest company in the world, or they swap places with Microsoft every couple of days. They're doing a dance. But they can only produce so many chips, and as I mentioned, it's not yet enough to kind of meet global demand. Thirdly, we have what we call kind of increasing LLM complexity, right? So LLM stands for large language model, right? It is the name for the technical term for ChatGPT 3 or ChatGPT 4 or Llama 3. These are all versions of large language models, right? And what we're seeing is that later generation models are exponentially more expensive to train. And when I say expensive, I mean from a compute perspective, from a data perspective, and then also from a cost perspective, right? So what's happening is as these companies are trying to make their models more intelligent, right, so that they become, more effective tools for us to use, they're finding that it's also costing them exponentially more GPUs than it did just a year before, right? So we're seeing this exponential ramp up of compute, but we're not seeing a similar ramp up in supply or a similar ramp up in the performance of chips. So we're getting this like growing gap between what's required of later models and the chip that's coming online. And then finally, and this is where we get into, I guess, really the sweet spot for Aethir. Finally, we also have the fact that these resources are really poorly managed, right? As a resource that's out there, they're incredibly inefficiently managed. And we did a lot of research on this, and we found out that when you take a look at enterprise GPU resources sitting in data centers in the US, for example, they're sitting at anywhere from 15 to 18% utilization rate, right? So they're underutilized, often nearly 80% of the time, right? So we thought to ourselves, if we could create this infrastructure layer, right, that would allow us to onboard compute from a variety of different owners and then surface it really, really simply to the market, we could connect a new, very meaningful amount of supply to this global compute global demand, compute demand ecosystem. So that's effectively what we built, right? We built this enterprise-focused GPU compute marketplace where data centers, tech companies, enterprises, even crypto mining organizations that have a large amount of latent GPUs, they can connect their GPUs to our network, surface them within our infrastructure, earn rewards for doing work within the ecosystem, and provide their supply to this global compute demand market. And obviously, that demand market can then access compute within our infrastructure and access it in a way that's cheaper and also more available than current big solutions.
Mm-hmm. No, it's a great overview, Mark. I appreciate that explanation, and it definitely seems like there's a disequilibrium in the demand versus supply that needs to be solved with the amount of underutilization from all these enterprises, and it's just not clicking properly. I'm curious on, I know Bitcoin miners and crypto miners have a lot of GPU power as well, but what about individual people or that want to contribute to a decentralized network? Maybe they don't have as much significant GPU power as others, but is anybody able to contribute to GPU power and then earn something through a decentralized market?
Yeah, that's a great question, and it leads to kind of a big differentiator that Aethir has in the market. Now, when you look at DePIN, the Decentralized Physical Infrastructure Network, which is kind of the broader classification for projects that build infrastructure that's contributed by others, right? So Bitcoin is effectively a DePIN, people contributing their compute to the DePIN algorithm. Helium, people buying these boxes, contributing it to the Helium network. All the DePIN. Within the DePIN sector, there's compute DePIN, right? And this is where Aethir lives. It's where we have multiple different compute providers contributing their compute to a broader network objective. Now, when you look at how these DePIN projects have generally been built, right? What the traditional model is effectively taking your token and incentivizing consumers to contribute their GPUs, right? Contribute their gaming PC GPU, contribute their idle, MacBook GPU when they're not using it, because there's a huge amount of like latent compute sitting out there in people's homes. And traditionally, compute DePINs have focused on this form of latent compute, right? Because you can take your token and you can pretty easily incentivize users to join your network, right? Because that compute, that GPU, it's essentially a sunk cost to them, and anything that they can kind of do to earn from that compute is beneficial to them. The challenge here, however, right, is even though you can build a network of GPUs really, really quickly, right, and even though you can build a really strong community because you have a bunch of people that are very interested in your token doing well because they're providing the resources, they're mining that network, it's a really difficult, if not impossible, compute network to sell to enterprise customers, right? Because let's say you take a bunch of gaming PCs, 1,000, 5,000 gaming PCs, and you take that to an enterprise customer, the first thing they're going to do is ask you, well, Ashton, how can you guarantee to me that those GPUs aren't just going to be switched off at night, right? How do you know that the gamer is not going to, just switch his PC off when he goes to sleep? Or how can you guarantee me that the bandwidth of that user's home is not just going to be throttled because they have a Zoom call or because they're watching Netflix, right? You really struggle to meet the service and quality and performance and uptime requirements of enterprise compute buyers when you're building a compute network on the back of consumer equipment, right? So I guess your question was, can consumers contribute to this type of network? Yes, they can, traditionally. Can they contribute to Aethir's network? No, they can't, not today. And the reason is because Aethir has built a 100% enterprise-focused, enterprise-grade DePIN, right? And that's a massive differentiator for us, right? We have 43,000 GPUs within our network. 100% of them are enterprise-grade, sitting inside a data center or connected to enterprise-grade network infrastructure. We have a global compute network that's perfectly suited to meet the requirements of the biggest enterprise customers in the world, right? And that's something that no other DePIN can say. It's put us in a situation where we can onboard the biggest AI companies in the world. We have the largest LLM training contract coming on the back of the DePIN, right? This is FedML, or as they rebranded recently to Tensor Opera. They're training their own open source model on the back of Aethir's H100. We have the biggest telecommunication company in the world scaling out on our infrastructure. And you couldn't do any of that if you had a network built on the back of consumer GPUs. So to be honest, it was a harder thing to do, right? I just spent the first half of this telling you how difficult it was to access these types of GPUs, and it is. But if you can aggregate them, right? If you can create a meaningful amount of supply and convince and show to your customers that this supply is available at the highest level of quality and performance, you have a massive advantage, because obviously the unit economics of compute within our network are very, very different to a network where you have to purchase every GPU yourself. You have to own those servers yourself, right? So we can outcompete traditional compute providers in almost every way, because we're built in this decentralized way. Now, that being said, and sorry for rambling, but that being said, do we intend to open the door for consumer compute in the future? First of all, yes, right? Will it be within the next maybe 6 months? We'll see. If we do open that door, it has to be for meaningful product that we can sell, right? Aethir is very much about real business. That's why we have, probably the strongest revenues definitely in DePIN, if not in the broader sort of crypto community. So we're very, very focused on making sure that the supply and the compute within the network has utility, and that we're able to sell it, and we actually have customers for it. So we do intend to bring consumer compute into our network in the future. What form that'll be, I can't tell you today. However, I can just, and I know we'll touch on this in a second, but I can mention that we specifically did a node sale, right? Because the specifications for running a node were such that anyone with a computer, anyone with a consumer grade device could run a checker node. And that checker node is functioning, doing work within our ecosystem. So for us, we were like, do we downgrade the requirements of our enterprise compute so that we can let retail in, or do we give them access to a different role within our ecosystem, a very, very important role, right? The checker, and let them in there. And we chose to keep the standards for our GPU compute extremely high, but open the door for the checker role and decentralize that to kind of onboard consumers into our network.
It's a lot of very great points, Mark, and I agree with you that this is business, and you want to go for the highest quality and make sure that you have 99.99% uptime. And it's great to have a decentralized network where anybody can contribute, but who knows, what old graphics card Jimmy is using as a hobby trying to connect. And if you're trying to train the next ChatGPT 5 on that, it might just not cut it. So
100%.
I see that vision, and it's nice to see that that's possible in the future, but also the checker node, because I did see on the site there's a node sale with DePIN, but that's how people can contribute, and not just through their graphics card, but they can be a part of the network. So that's really good to know. Now, at the beginning, you spoke about the huge gap between, there's a lot of demand and the supply, and how you're filling that. It's hard to quantify, but are you guys making a significant gap being filled there? You know, how much more demand is needed with what you guys have? Are you guys able to sort of supply what everyone needs?
Yeah, that's also a great question. Short answer, no. Right now we're not making a meaningful dent, right? The massive amount of compute that is needed, right? The gap between global compute demand and global compute supply is just so immense that really, unless you're an Amazon, right? Unless you're a Google, you're not making a dent, right? I mean, it's crazy to think about the scale of what's being built in this space to service the compute sector. So, for example, you definitely try and find the exact quote because I'm going to butcher it. But Microsoft is deploying at the moment, or they're undertaking the deployment of the biggest infrastructure project in the history of modern man, right? They're deploying more capital to stand up compute data centers than has ever been deployed on any infrastructure project ever, right? It is massive. Like we're sitting at the point now where the world is looking down the barrel of so much compute demand that they're estimating that the world can't produce enough power, right? We literally won't have enough power supply as a planet, right, with current infrastructure to satisfy the compute demand just 5 years from now, right? So is Aethir making a meaningful dent there? Not yet, right? But I can guarantee you that nothing scales quicker in a compute ecosystem than a decentralized compute network, right? And as more and more compute is coming online, right? And as Aethir refines the onboarding mechanism, as we get better and more visible to traditional compute providers, do I think that we have the ability to make a very meaningful dent? 100%, right? Because you have to remember, the companies that are buying compute are not just companies like Amazon or I'll say AWS in this context. They're not just companies like AWS or Microsoft Azure or Google Cloud, right? Those companies have the ability to buy and on sell, right? But the average tech company doesn't, right? They buy and it sits in their own data center, or it sits in the data center they're renting space in. And if they stuff up their forecasting, if they overbuy, right, or if they delay production, that expensive compute, and this is the most expensive compute of all time, right? There have never been chips this expensive, right? It's burning a massive hole in their pocket. So you have this resource that's incredibly rare, right? That companies know they need to compete in this market, and they also know that it's probably going to be more difficult to get this compute in 6 months, right? So if I have the opportunity to buy now, I better do it. And then they have the flip side of that, which is if they stuff up how much they need, or if their timelines are a little bit off, it's so expensive to hold this compute idle. And that's where Aethir has this really, really incredible opportunity to de-risk that compute infrastructure for all of the companies out there that don't necessarily have the ability or the BD teams or the infrastructure to on-sell their compute through the cloud.
That's a great point. I'm looking forward to it. And, you know, I've been following Web3 cloud a little bit over the years, and it's growing, but it seems like the majority of, you know, cloud infrastructure, you know, I don't know the exact percentage, but it seems like Amazon or AWS, you know, runs like 80% of the internet. And it's hard for Web3 to make a dent. You have to, you know, either compete on price or quality. What do you think about that transition of hosting, processing power, everything, data, into Web3? Do you think that Web3 will gain more market share than the traditional cloud, and traditional cloud will go down, or they'll both grow, but Web3, will it be able to keep up as much?
Yeah, I think anyone that's out there kind of thinking that Web3 will overtake kind of Web2 in any sort of major sector is probably a little bit delusional today, right? It's particularly when we're talking about the core competency of the biggest companies in the world, right? Mm-hmm. So is Web3 going to overtake? I would say probably not, right? But like I kind of mentioned in the previous question, do I think that we can have a very meaningful position within that? Mm-hmm. 100%, right? Because if you think about the ecosystem, right? Just comparing Aethir to AWS, for example, GPUs are the same, right? We're selling the same compute. It's not like we have special Web3 GPUs and they have Web2 GPUs. No, same GPUs, right? Mm-hmm. Infrastructure, right? Physical infrastructure, same data centers, right? So this equipment is sitting in the same places that Amazon, AWS's equipment is sitting in, right? We're linked up to the web through the same subsea cables, through the same network infrastructure, right? It's all the same, right? So what's different? Well, Web3 has kind of two really unique advantages, right? Or two levers that they can pull that I think are very useful levers. First of all, we have the ability to onboard other people's compute, right? I think that is a meaningful scalability advantage from a cost and unit economics perspective, but also a speed of reaching market perspective, right? And then we have the token, right? The token is just something that these companies don't have. And the ability to take that token, use it to incentivize certain behaviors within your network, use it to subsidize, use it to transmit currency across borders into regions that you don't have a presence. Like there are just some really strong network advantages that a Web3 provider in this space has that allow us to compete in some specific areas in really, really interesting ways. Now, I think whenever you look at a Web3 company coming in and trying to compete with Web2, generally we will try and compete on price, right? Because we'll take the token and we'll subsidize and we'll have like a lower cost product in some sense. And is Aethir going to do that? Yes, right? I think we'd be silly not to take advantage of the token in ways that can affect the price that we're able to provide to our customers. But I think the trap that a lot of projects fall into within this space with their token is using the token as just as effectively only a discount, and also using the token to heavily subsidize the scalability of your network, right? So creating these incentive programs that allow you to onboard a huge amount of users really, really quickly, right? But then put you in the situation where you've attracted a lot of people that have a short-term interest in your network, right? And then as an enterprise service provider, right? And you're going to these customers and saying, hey, I've got 10,000 GPUs, they're perfect for you, right? And the compute provider says, okay, I want a 3-year contract. Can you guarantee that all of that compute is going to be here in 3 years? If you've created a network that's really kind of volatile because people need rewards to be there, then you've done yourself a real disservice, because actually the biggest thing you need to be optimizing for as a Web3 company is stability, because that's where we get picked apart by every Web2 company out there, right? They rip us to shreds on our credibility. They rip us to shreds on the state of our ecosystem as a whole, right? So I fundamentally believe that the most important thing you can do with your token is actually ensure that it's incentivizing the stability of your network, right? And if you could do that first, and then also use your token to create great price incentives, right? To create great compute incentives, like all of those are really important pieces, and they give you a great competitive edge. But unless you're solving for the stability piece, you're not going to be around long enough for someone like Amazon to even really care about you.
Yeah, no, that's a great point, Mark. Traditional business is so much about, how can we make it 10 years down the road so that, this can be a company that is here for decades and it becomes one of the biggest companies in the world. And on the crypto side, you're also sort of fighting against, in some sense, Bitcoin as a gatekeeper and the market fluctuations of crypto being such a small industry that although you have a great traditional service, with the Web3 twist, you're sort of thrown into the wild waters of Bitcoin going up and down. And a lot of people are there thinking shorter term, although we are starting to see a lot more institutional investors, especially with the ETF, coming in thinking long term with 10-year plus investment horizons, which I think is great as that trickles down into Web3 services and infrastructure. That long-term investment horizon is hopefully going to affect these kinds of companies more, where they're thinking long-term. I think it's a great point about stability, and because it's not going to be, it will scale very quickly with AI, as you said. In the next year or two, the compute power will be needed, but you need to be thinking 5-10 years down the road. Otherwise, you're not going to make it, because it's going to continue to scale exponentially faster each year.
100%. Yeah, totally agree. And infrastructure, people in crypto love the term infrastructure, right? But infrastructure is something that takes time, right? Infrastructure takes time, and we're definitely in this for the long run, right? Mm-hmm. That's why we chose to be enterprise first, even though we knew it would take us longer to get to market. It's why we have such a strong focus on real business and onboarding real revenue and real customers into our network, because 5 years is going to be a blink of an eye for us, right? We're going to be here for decades, and I think we'll be a part of building some really significant pieces of the AI economy that we're all going to start to really be seeing over the next kind of couple of years.
I love to see it. And now I was just looking at, the launch just happened in the recent weeks here, and also the ATH token. I saw the node sales going on. Is there any other way that people can contribute? Say they don't have an enterprise warehouse of graphics cards in their backyard. How else can people sort of get involved with this if this is the kind of thing they're interested?
For sure. Well, just to clarify for any of the listeners, the node sale itself is now closed, right? So the node sale closed. That was a fantastic campaign. We ended up selling just over 72,000 checker nodes, raising around 42,000 ETH, right? So depending on ETH price, anywhere from 125 to 150 mil, right? Biggest node sale in Web3 history. It was totally insane, and really, to be honest, just really such a strong indicator of the power of this community, right? And the conviction that community has for what we're building. And I think having the node sale and giving people the ability to come in and run those nodes and do truly meaningful work within our ecosystem, effectively, the checkers are the police force of the network. So it was this really clear separation of police and state, right? We were effectively handing over the keys of the police force to our network through this decentralized checker ecosystem. And by running those checker nodes, by conducting those checker tasks within a network, they're keeping the network safe. They're keeping the network free from bad actors. Mm-hmm. And that's a really powerful role, and it deserves a lot of reward as well. So there's a significant amount of Aethir's token supply that's distributed every year to all of those 72,000 node operators. So that was super cool. Unfortunately, for those that missed out, we closed that that sale a couple of weeks ago. There is a really cool staking product that's available. So if you're really interested in committing and earning rewards, but you don't necessarily have any physical hardware to contribute, you're more than welcome to go to stake.aethir.com and contribute your ATH to the staking pools there. And then you'll also earn reward as a result of that contribution. I think for those people out there that are really interested in the hardware piece and being a part of the physical network infrastructure, we have a really cool product called Aethir Edge, right? So you can check out that at myedge.io, right? And it is a physical mining box about this big. It looks like a short, fat PlayStation 5. It's super cool. It's a very, very premium device, right? You buy it, it's boxed incredibly well, right? It just feels awesome. Anyway, you buy one of those, you plug it in to the power in your home, it connects to your network, and it will passively operate as an enterprise grade network node within Aethir's ecosystem. We actually partnered with Qualcomm, right? So it's their latest AI chip in that device. And it functions as an AI capable node within Aethir's enterprise node network, right? So we will actually be pushing work out to the Aethir Edge ecosystem. It will be doing that work and receiving, really, really, well thought out rewards, for those that are the owners of the device. So super cool. You purchase it, you plug it in, you forget about it, right? It's passive, but it takes advantage of the fact that we're putting compute close to the user, because big AI companies, big tech companies, they care about what we call the edge, right? That is compute that can happen closer and closer to users, because the closer you can do some tasks, the quicker they can then distribute those tasks to the user who's requested it, right? And it's traditionally been a very, very difficult part of the network infrastructure puzzle, right? If you try and solve it with consumer compute, like you mentioned, you don't know whether Jimmy has a different PC from someone else, and you've got so much heterogeneity and variety on the edge that it's really difficult to like unify and sell it, right? But what we've done with the Aethir Edge is homogenize that layer, right? Because if we sell this box, the box is the same everywhere. Mm-hmm. And then we've got this unified edge network that we can start delivering really cool enterprise workloads to, and people can earn rewards from owning it.
Wow, very cool. I'm going to check that out for sure. I can leave a link in the show notes to the Edge and also to the staking platform for those who are interested. It sounds like you guys are on the cusp of something huge, because I know the processing power is going to be ridiculous in what is needed in AI, and I don't think I can even fathom how good it's about to get. Even just the incremental versions of the LLM models over 1 year is crazy to see the expansion, and I think the next few years are going to be mind-blowing. So I'm wishing all the best for you and your team on delivering the processing power to the right areas to make all that happen.
Yeah, it's not going to be easy, but this is what we're great at, right? So we're very excited. We've got a really strong community. We have fantastic infrastructure already out there. We're in 25 different countries, and that number goes up almost every couple of days. So we're extremely well positioned, and I'm very, very optimistic.
Amazing. Thank you so much, Mark. I would love to have you guys back on in the near future, and wishing you all the best until then.
Thanks very much, Ashton. Thanks for having me. It's been a pleasure.